Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another motovlog. Today we're going to be reviewing my 2005 GSXR 750 versus my buddy's, 2009, 2008 CBR600RR. But today we're just going to be reviewing the two, doing a comparison between my 750 versus the 600. I have rode his bike before plenty of times, and I've rode my bike obviously a lot. I've put about 12,000 miles on it, so let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so first things first, hopping on my GSXR 750. It is a far more aggressive seating position than the CBR600. Now, this is what I've noticed with a lot of just GSXRs, and especially my 750 in general, is that you are far more hunched over on this bike than you would be a CBR600. The other thing I did notice is the seat is a little bit more comfortable than compared to the CBR600. It is a little bit of a thinner seat, so mine is a little bit more comfortable to sit on, but you do lean forward just quite a bit further on a 750 compared to a CBR600. But without further ado, let's go ahead and see how these two do on the road. So obviously I've spent a lot of time riding my bike. I have a lot of miles under it. It is at 17,300 miles right now, and I bought this at about 5,200 miles. So I've had about 12,000 miles on this thing since I've gotten it, and I've rode it on the highway, rode it on the interstate here and there, but a lot of the miles have been done in this town, and I've seen a lot of these roads many times. So like I said before, the seating position on this bike is a little bit more aggressive. It feels like you're bent over just a bit farther compared to like a CBR600RR and how it sits. On the CBR600, I'll talk more on that. You feel like you're sitting more straight up, but I'm not saying this isn't an uncomfortable ride or an uncomfortable bike, because I truly do love this bike, and I definitely did get used to it, and it still is a lot of fun. Now with my bike being 750, I do have about 150 more cc than the 600RR, so I am able to pull a bit faster, a bit stronger, and go, I mean, obviously I have a higher top speed than a CBR600RR would, as I have 750 cc. So like I said, when I first got this bike, it was a very aggressive seating position. I did feel like I was laying across my gas tank as if I was in a tucked position, but I have since gotten used to that, so I'm no longer feeling like I'm hunched over the whole time, and it's just been a lot more comfortable on my back and other things like that. My back did used to hurt as I started riding this bike when I first got it, because I was not used to the riding position, because I went from a 300cc, a Ninja 300 actually, to this 750, and it is just a far more aggressive riding style, because these 600 and above cc bikes are track bikes. You know, they want to go fast. You know, they got a lot of power, they got a lot of torque, and they want to go quick. They do not like to sit down and do nothing. So it does have a bit more of an aggressive seating position than a 300 or any other bike like that. Now I have sat on a few GSXR 600s and GSXR 1000s, and I still feel like it is the same, or relatively the same, is that these GSXRs just sit a little bit more aggressively than any other bike besides like an R6. I've been on a new R6 and I've sat on it, and that is really aggressive, and it also sits very tall. This bike did sit tall for me when I got it, and I had to get some wishbones and lower it, but out of all the sport bikes 600cc and above, GSXRs I believe do sit the lowest with the seat height. That means that if you are a shorter person and you are looking to get a sport bike, I would recommend staying away from the R3, R6, R1 area and look more into GSXRs, or even a CBR would be good, but these do sit naturally lower than any other 600 that I've been on. Now the other thing that I've noticed when I ride this GSXR is that I'm right up against the gas tank. I can scoot back, and I do have obviously quite a bit of room, to the point where like I can extend my feet on my frame sliders and I'm at the back of the bike, and if I were to slide all the way back to the seat, I am just very flat right now. It's a very uncomfortable riding position. There's a lot of weight on my wrists, which isn't the most fun, but you know, sitting close to the gas tank isn't bad by any means, nor do I hate it. It is just something that I have noticed, is that there is a lot more space behind me going to my rear passenger seat than would be on a CBR. Now with this 750, you are going to get more power, of course, obviously, but you're also going to get higher top end speed. But with coming those higher top end speeds and more power, you are going to have to keep this thing cool, and if you do a lot of bumper to bumper traffic, having more power isn't always the best. Now like I was mentioning before, there does seem to be a lot of space between me and the passenger seat, and I have had people in the back, and it doesn't have an issue for me. It was just always a worry at the beginning. I felt like there was too much space, but it has again never been an issue. It is just something that I've noticed. So with that space being back here, that actually provides me with a lot of room. When I do go into a full tuck, I can get really down low and into this gauge cluster right here, and to the point where like my visor is just barely peeking out over the top of this windscreen. Like I can see just about that much of the road in front of me when I really tuck. I mean, the camera's pulling my helmet down a little bit, of course, so that's going to affect it, but when I'm in a full tuck position, I am really enclosed on this bike. It is going to be different with the CBR, as you don't have as much room behind you, but with this I notice a lot more room behind me for me to be able to go into a full tuck position. So with this being a more aggressive riding position, the foot pegs are also a little bit further back, and instead of just completely underneath you. I feel like the CBR foot pegs are just slightly more underneath you instead of back behind you. So your legs are bent a little bit back further than would be a CBR 600, but I believe that also helps with your tucking position when you are doing a pull or on a track trying to go quick. I don't know who you are, but I'll wave at you. So when I am trying to get really low and tuck into the bike, you know, just to do the speed limit, of course, never over, I am really able to get in here and really tuck my elbows into the gas tank, and I am just pinned into this position and into this bike, and provides me with a lot of comfort when I'm in that position doing it, you know, doing the speed limit, of course, and it is not uncomfortable by any means, and I feel like I'm truly inside the little air bubble that the bike creates as you're riding. You know, it shoots air up and over, and it just goes over my helmet, and it is super comfortable. Now, when doing the pull, we can see I'm in second gear at about 7,000 RPMs. Let's give it a little juice here. Get tucked. That was just to the speed limit there, but as you can see, I'm really deep into the gauge cluster. The GoPro is probably literally only capturing this. I highly doubt with this windscreen it is going to be able to see anything besides just this gauge cluster and a little bit to the left and the right. That is really, you can get really tucked on this bike, and that is something that I don't think you can do as well on a CBR600. You know, when you first get on this, one thing I noticed that GSXR said is, because he's rode all types of bikes, this thing in the beginning will pull like 1,000cc. It'll really have a lot of torque and a lot of power at the low gears, and at the upper end of the threshold, that's where the 1,000ccs will really take over. The other thing that my bike does not have that the CBR600 does have is a fuel gauge. Now, it does have a fuel light so that when you're getting low, the light will come on to say, hey, you need to get fuel. However, I haven't ran into any instances where I'm so far out of the way I'm not going to be able to get gas. Plus, these things get good gas mileage compared to cars or anything like that. So you're not going to be stuck anytime soon unless you really kind of push it to its limits and are going super quick and end up running out of gas on the side of the road. Alright, it's time to hop on the CBR600RR. This thing does have the Toast exhaust on it, so it is pretty dang loud, and I'm honestly a huge fan of it. It sounds absolutely amazing. I'm going to leave my visor open so you guys can get the full effect of this thing starting. Ready? As you can tell, this thing is substantially louder than my bike because of this Toast exhaust we got on here. We're gonna let this thing warm up for just a bit before we get going. All right, right away hopping on this bike, it does just naturally feel like I'm leaning forward as well. However, the riding position is not as aggressive. The windscreen is a little bit tucked down lower, I guess I should say. So when you do go to tuck on this bike, it is not going to be as aggressive as it would be my bike. And I just feel like I'm in a far more straight up position. As you can see, my feet are a lot more underneath me instead of behind. And overall, it's just a bit more comfortable to ride. Okay, so just getting on this bike, I haven't rode it in a while, and when I am turning, I feel like I'm using a lot more of the handlebars to turn than I am like leaning. So when I ride my bike, I really just lean into the curve. The handlebars will send itself over, they'll counter steer. But with this, I'm feeling a lot more pressure when I am trying to counter steer and go into the curves. There's a lot more of a straight up, more comfortable riding position. My feet are far more underneath me, like I said, and overall, it's just not as aggressive as my 750 is. Also, the size of the tank on this is about 4.8 gallons, and on this my 750 is about 4.49. So you are getting a little bit more gas, and also just kind of depends on how you ride it as to how much you get for the gallon. So right here, this little black box, you notice it's a gear indicator. So right now I'm in first gear, and when I click it up into neutral, you know, you'll see neutral there. It's really nice to have one of those. I sadly don't. I don't know if they make one for my bike, but I'd absolutely love to get one. If any companies are watching this and would love to send me one, do it, because I'd absolutely love it. All right, green light. But yeah, whenever I'm going through turns like this, I do feel a lot more pressure on my left hand when trying to counter steer, as well as my right when I'm going the opposite direction. So I guess if you are looking for a bike that sits a little bit more straight up compared to one that's a little bit more aggressive, I think the CBR600 would be a great fit, as it just is a lot more comfortable of a riding position for somebody that hasn't rode, or for somebody that is coming from a 300cc or something that sits a little bit more up naturally, like an MT-07 or something like that. This thing just sits up pretty straight, and it is far more comfortable on your back, your wrists, everything like that. And when it comes to a passenger seat, I do feel like I am closer to it, and I can scoot back, but when I tuck, because of just how small the windscreen is, I just don't feel like I'm in the little air bubble that the bike creates. I feel like my head's still poking out of it. I still don't feel as in with the bike as I could be, or as compared to my 750, I should say. Overall though, in fourth gear, when I roll onto it, it does still have a lot of pull and a lot of kick. This still is a 600cc bike and does have a lot of power, and is nothing to be messing around with, I'll tell you that much. It is just a bit more of a comfortable ride. That's really what I have to say about this. It's just far more comfortable. And the turning is the only other thing that I've noticed, is that being in a more aggressive position, it is a lot easier to counter steer, and there's not as much pressure on your hands to counter steer. So like I said, when I'm going into this turn here, I'm really pushing with my right hand to turn the bars to the left to counter steer. While on my 750, I feel like it naturally just lays over that way. So we'll do a small pull here in a second. Yeah, so that power really kicks in around the 7,000 to 9,000 RPM range for these CBRs. As you can see, this red line's at 15,000 RPM to 17,000 RPM. Mine red line's from 14,000 to 16,000. So he has about 1,000 more RPM than me. So he does red line higher. However, mine does have 150 more CC. So going into this small curve right here, I'm really getting a lot of pressure on my hand, like I mentioned. It is just far more than I ever anticipated or ever thought would happen than my 750 would be. It is just not wanting to go over as well, and I'm really having to, you know, I can throw my 750 around pretty well, and I can throw this around pretty well, but I feel like I can't get as low on this bike. Like, I still feel like I can get low, but I feel like my 750 just naturally leans over just a bit further. No, but this exhaust is just beautiful. This is absolutely wonderful. So here we are again, 7,000 RPM. Let's get tucked and let's see how this thing does. So yeah, this definitely doesn't pull anywhere near as hard as a 750 does. I still feel like it pulls very, very hard and very, very fast. You can get going very fast, but the 750 just has that 150 extra cc that really gives it that extra oomph to get going just a bit faster. Man, this thing just vibrates you too. With this exhaust on, it's right underneath the passenger seat. Bro over there was loving it. So I feel like the power band on this bike, or where the power mainly comes from, is just after that 7,000 RPM range. I feel like that's when all the power really kicks in and it really gives you all of it from the bike. Oop, found neutral. Now the other thing I did notice about this bike is that there's a lot more heat coming underneath my seat and also the rear passenger seat and just kind of around my back because of that rear exit exhaust. I gotta put this thing into a high gear to be able to talk to you guys, otherwise it's gonna be too loud. But yeah, overall this bike is fantastic. You know, I have no complaints about it. I think it's a very comfortable ride. You know, I think that the seat could be a bit better, but overall this bike is absolutely fantastic. You know, wow, that's looking kind of scary. Good thing I'm heading home. Well, there's my opinion, my review for my 2005 GSXR 750 versus the 2008 CBR600RR. At least I'm pretty sure it's a 2008. Overall, absolutely fantastic bikes. I would love to ride either one of them any day. So when it comes down to what you want to ride, go ahead and take into consideration what I said with the more vertical seating position versus the more aggressive seating position. But overall, my GSXR is a little bit more comfortable for me because I'm more used to riding it. However, I would take a 600RR any day just for how upright it sits and how comfortable it is. And overall, it's just a fantastic bike. They're Hondas. They're never going to break. You know, they're basically invincible. But yeah, that wraps it up.